Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Jay Kishi, and this is Producer Tip Tuesday, where we discuss overlooked topics on how to be a better producer. Before we get into it, I invite you guys to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, as it really helps out the channel. And if you're interested, I live stream these discussions each Tuesday on my Twitch, which is linked in the description. Otherwise, I'll be posting the edited down version each week here on my YouTube. Without further ado, hope you guys enjoy. So today, the topic is how to go about finishing things and why it's important to finish tracks. When it comes to finishing beats, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is just like finding a workflow that works for you. For me, at least, I've noticed that it's a lot easier for me to like make as much as I can put down to get a version of it in Ableton, and then I can come back to it, figure out what needs to be added, what needs to be taken away. If you struggle with finishing beats, then I think the best thing that you can do to start with is trying to pursue your ideas more earnestly the first time around. So instead of setting up a track, you make like a 4-bar loop and then you save it and then you go do something else. Try to make more material for your future self to work with. So like I kind of just experienced that with this track. I kind of wish that I had already made a bridge when I was in the headspace that I was in when I originally made this beat, because I think that usually, though, when I've made tracks that way, it usually comes out a lot better for me. Say you have this idea of like a huge project and you're like, I just need to get started, and the only thing you do is like make a drum pattern, and then you're like, all right, that's enough for today. The longer you wait, the more the pressure builds up. A version of this beat, of this song or whatever, this idea that's in your head, and the longer it goes on, the more you hype up that idea, and then it becomes a lot harder for you to commit to any one decision when you actually are trying to make the damn thing. So moving quickly and early, like how many sections is it going to have? Is this for a rapper, or is this for what's the context of this? The earlier you can figure that stuff out, then the better off you are. It's important early on in the process to just like put as many ideas down as possible and not hold back too much, which is kind of what we were talking about last time, turning off the inner critic. So when you go into the finishing process, for me at least, maybe I've made a track and it's been a day or two, or even just like an hour. I'll come back, and then what I'll do is I'll just listen to it one time. Once I have like, if it's just an 8-bar loop, then you're not going to be able to do a whole lot, but I think it still applies. Once you have something, listen to it, and whether you're taking notes or trying to take mental notes, just try to be very, very clear about what stands out as like things that are good or bad on that very first listen, because the first listen is the most honest one. Your brain will naturally try to find solutions to things that feel wrong, little timings, a little slight timing issue or mixing weirdness, something that stands out. Your brain will try to convince yourself that it's fine on multiple listens. So the first time you listen is the most important. And then after that, I think it's just repeating that process is like, adjust what you think you noticed, then give it time, and then listen again, notice things on the first listen, adjust them, and then give it time. Ideally, you would be able to do that cycle. But when you can't do that, one thing you could do is have a checklist. For me, I kind of have like a mental checklist. So like if I've done my first listen and I'm like, everything sounds okay, the next thing I'll do on most of my beats is before I even get to mixing, I'm looking at, parts of the drums that I could mute, places where I could add fills, places where I could add transitions, things like that. That's something that I do in the finishing process. That's usually not something I do in the initial process, but things like transitions that can be cleaned up, the intro and the outro. During the editing process, you have to actually be a little more critical and be able to turn on that inner critic again and identify what's good and bad and what's missing, like in terms of what the end goal of the track is, need to be in your head when you're going about the finishing process. So that's how to go about finishing. Other things that relate to how you can be more effective at finishing tracks, like it basically comes down to productivity. Like how can you be more productive and be more efficient? So I think a lot of things that would apply to like generic productivity hacks and stuff like that people talk about, the Pomodoro method, or just writing things down on a sheet of paper and crossing them off, the most basic version of that, or whether or you use like some fancy to-do list app or something. No matter what, like all those things can apply to just like the task of finishing something. But some things that have worked for me, I've had in the past a friend of mine agree to charge me money if I don't finish 5 tracks by the end of the week and send them to him in a SoundCloud playlist, a private SoundCloud playlist. And then the agreement was that he would listen to it and then give me feedback on it. And then it wasn't so much about the feedback, but it was just simply the fact that I had someone who I was beholden to, keep me accountable. Yo, Alex, thank you for the sub. Appreciate that, man. Sub with the Prime. Give me that Bezos money. So yeah, I think that was one of the things that really helped me. I actually stopped doing that, and I really want to start doing that again. Alex, we had talked about last time doing in January, the January thing, to publish something on Instagram or wherever, SoundCloud, every day for the month of January. That's called Jamuary, Jam, Jamuary. Yeah, I think that's an awesome thing. And so I did it last year, and it really set me off. It like gave me a lot of momentum going into the year. And so I wanted the same thing this coming year. There's also people who I think don't work so well under those circumstances, like aren't very driven by like an obligation to someone else. I think there's definitely people out there who are like that. And so for them, I think you really have to ask yourself, and this is where like intention comes in. Like, why do you need to finish this track? And to be able to answer all those questions for yourself, like, I could go play video games, or I could try to finish this track. Well, how would I feel if I played games versus how would I feel if I finished this track? Personally, whenever I've finished something, it's like I've like a 400-pound backpack. I just like took it off my back, and I feel so relieved. What's your goal? Is your goal to get better at this? Well, you're not going to get better at this if you don't spend time working on this very important aspect of it, which allows you to actually finish something and get something out there that people can interact with. Depending on your goal, you need to identify that for yourself. But if you're not the type of person that's driven by external obligation, you might be the type of person that just needs to convince yourself why you need to do something. So I think for finishing a project, that's very important. Identifying what style of motivation works well for you, internal versus external, you could say. There's this study that people did, basically for a photography course. The professor split the students into 2 groups for the photography course. One group was required would be graded only on the number of photos that they produced, and the other group would be graded only on the quality of one photo that they're allowed to submit. Like they don't need to take pictures. They don't need to meet a certain threshold for quantity, but they have to present a certain threshold for quality. Whereas the other group, all they were graded on was quantity. And what they noticed was that the quantity group took better photos. They just figured out how to take photographs, because the process of having to take all those photos that they were assigned, implicitly gave them the tools necessary to take a great photo, gave them the opportunity to experiment. Yeah, when you say like, doing it just to do it versus trying to get really high quality out of it, I think because it is a challenge where you're doing it every day, you're inevitably going to get both. In my opinion, most projects don't feel like they're done when they're supposed to be done. You feel comfortable at like 80%, and then you start to realize that the last 20% is like so tedious that it's almost better that you just like get it as much as you can finish it as much as you can tolerate, and then just get it out there. That's the process I go through a lot of times. Well, here's a few things that I think I could change if I had some more time, but I don't want to spend another day on this, so this is what it is. And sometimes those are the things that people will notice, and other times they're things that nobody will ever notice, like except for maybe like a mixing engineer. So, and it depends, like whether it's something related to the writing or the recording or the mixing, production. You have to prioritize different things at different stages of the process. And during the finishing process, you're trying to take on the perspective of a listener. So if a listener is not going to notice something, then, got to be efficient. Try not to spend too much time on it. But if you do have the chance to work on it and fix something, and like, you know, it was like, oh yeah, the deadline was supposed to be today, but it got extended, then be aware of those things that you now have time to fix. One thing that I've been trying to do, I haven't done it for this project where I'm like trying to just finish a bunch of tracks, but I've done it in the past. I'll just I'll have like 4 or 5, maybe more tracks that are in progress, and I know I have time to finish a set number of them. What I'll do is I'll just print out, I'll render the audio, like a mix down of all of them separately. You just title them like untitled track 1, untitled track 2, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you know which project is which. So yeah, you render out audio, just like give it generic names, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Listen to them and then decide which one is the most important to finish, and then just work from there. And it really helps like give you that objectivity, being able to step away, step back, just have a clearer view of things. Another thing about finishing, you're probably not done unless you've said no to something that you actually kind of liked. Like there was something that you wanted to keep in there, but then you realized that it doesn't fit. Every track should do one thing really well. Maybe you wanted to have like this like chill lo-fi song that had like a bridge that brought everything up and it was super up tempo, but maybe it just doesn't work. And so the idea might be good. The idea could be really good, but it just doesn't fit this track. That's the stage of the process, and that's part of what makes it so difficult when you're finishing things is you got to say no to things that you actually, you know, were into, but they just don't fit. There's something blocking you from finishing this track, and it's because you're attached to an idea that you thought was good and you're trying to convince yourself that it's good, but maybe it's just not. The other thing is something to consider. What are you going to do with the things that you don't finish? Because it's okay to not finish everything, but if you have hundreds and hundreds of tracks and you finished like 10, that's a pretty bad ratio, in my opinion. My ratio of like tracks I've finished and tracks I've not finished is probably somewhere around there in the past. This year, I think I've done a pretty good job because of, like I said, that having a friend and that external factor of deadlines and things, and trying to be intentional. But yeah, if you're not finishing any tracks, you know, fix that first. But once you're at the point where you can recognize this idea is worth pursuing and this idea is not, the ones that you don't find, you know, exciting to finish, just print out stems, audio stems, and then compile like a library of your stems, and then make sure you have that available to you. So when you're starting your next project, like identify which parts were the like parts that you really don't like, and other parts that you know, maybe I really like the chord progression, but I don't really like the melody, or I like the drums, but I hate everything else. Save those drums, save that melody. Whatever part of it you like the most, save it for later, because there's 1.5 million things you could do with a little tiny musical idea these days. Like splice and all that. You could make your own sample pack and send it out, or you could just send it to your friend and be like, hey, I had this idea. It didn't turn into anything. Let me know if you think this is cool. And if you do, why don't you like try to make something with it? And if you wanted to start a new song, just like from the scrapyard of that old song, then, you know, it's a lot easier starting from not a blank slate. Thank you guys for watching. If it was helpful, go ahead and click the red subscribe button below and click the bell icon so that way you can stay up to date when I post new videos. Until next time.